We get asked a lot as investors, how do we think about AI? What's our AI strategy, whether it's with new investments, whether it's with current portfolio companies. We have a lot of response and opinion there, but would love to hear from you. How do you think companies that are coming out to market now to fundraise should be thinking about an AI strategy, and how should that weave into their narrative, into their story?
Yeah, so this is actually a super interesting conversation for me, especially since we started as an AI company, right? And I think a lot of people, especially investors, have had to look at this way differently over the last 6 months. I think when I talk to investors today, if you don't have an AI strategy, you're not getting an investment if you're a technology business looking to raise capital, right? So period. I think understanding how AI integrates into your business, you're starting to see the metrics move. So I was at a conference recently where some of the more historical metrics for how people think about pipeline and progression of the pipeline and conversion rates is getting impacted by AI. So you have AI in your company. So how are you thinking about the use of AI inside your business, and being able to think about leveraging that so you can get better leverage into your business and meet some of these new kind of metric driven requirements that you'll see from some of the leading investors in the world. So I think that's the first piece. Joe, as an AI company, we are an AI security company, which I think for us, was kind of the top of the list on nobody's list 3 years ago, and is now on the top of every security person's and CIO's list. So it's been an interesting transition to think about how impactful AI has been in a short amount of time per product, right? So not only in the business, but now how AI is going to impact product. For us personally, we've reorganized the way we think about how we build all of our features, how we actually manage that pipeline, how we think about the pods we put together. So an AI engineer or an AI lead tied to a senior developer, junior developer, infrastructure lead, and then underpinning that is an AI layer that enables our code development, as an example. And using that, it has doubled velocity in the last 3 months, right? So if you don't have a mechanism in your product, either to develop product or have AI in your product, which is kind of the third pillar, again, I think you've got to sit down and really start thinking about getting on to some of these exponential expectations, because if you're not if you're not building around them, it's too easy for others to leapfrog. And I think that's the fear that investors are starting to see. So, it's one of those three or all of those three as part of a plan. And certainly, I think more and more, we're going to see all three kind of hitting investor pitch decks as people are thinking about investing. And I haven't seen an investment in a tech company that hasn't had an AI pitch in probably the last year or so now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, our response is very consistent with yours, where certainly every tech company that we see these days needs to have an AI strategy. You mentioned the 3 pillars. We talked about it in a very similar way, right? There's 3 potential parts. The internal process improvements, efficiencies is 1, core product differentiation is 2, or enhancement of UI, UX, right? How people use the product. And the best companies do all 3, as Jonathan just described what they're doing at Cranium, right? From the investment side, we're less typically about investing in AI companies and more about understanding how AI can be leveraged in the areas we focus on, whether that's vertical SaaS, that's data platforms, applications, cyber infrastructure, et cetera. Kristen, just curious, perhaps, obviously now you're at Fidelity, big company, large asset manager, a lot of moving pieces. What are they thinking about in terms of AI? What's the broad corporate strategy there, and how does that impact your group more specifically?
Yeah, I think in general, Fidelity has always been and has a real appetite to always be on the cutting edge of any technology that is impacting fintech or has the potential to impact fintech. And so, of course, AI is on that list. There's a lot that we're doing, and in fact, and I'll share the link so we can get this out there. But we've done a number of great reports coming out of the Fidelity Center for Applied Technology on how we are thinking about AI, and specifically the application in fintech. And then more specifically within our group that works with startups, I think there are 2 things worth noting. One is there is some really interesting data about the valuations associated with companies that are leveraging AI in some way versus those that are not. valuations do tend to be about 30% higher for those that are using AI in some way. That said, I also think that investors can sniff it out very rapidly if you're sort of fake layering this on versus leveraging AI in a meaningful way. And what I mean by in a meaningful way is, I think they're the categories that Jonathan and Joe, you both touched on. There's some interesting examples also. We just did a big AI report earlier this year in collaboration with the New England Venture Capital Association, talking about AI in the Northeast. And one of the big kind of takeaways from this trends report was the different ways that, investors are not, there's not as much of an appetite right now as there was in the past, perhaps, for companies that are like just doing AI. Really, it's how do you apply AI to the healthcare system to help make nurses more efficient? How do you apply AI to financial services to make financial advisors more effective with the advice they give? It is really about like the sort of vertical application, if you will. And so I think like the one mistake I think I see founders making when it comes to AI is being a little bit too glib when talking about it. It's just like, oh, we're doing events plus AI and kind of leaving it at that. It's like that actually does you more harm than good, I think, than having a really clear stance on how you are going to leverage AI in your business to make your company more efficient, more effective, your clients more successful. So I think like better not to talk about it at all unless you're prepared to talk about it in a really specific way. And ideally, like have a specific perspective on how you will leverage AI.